Our story begins with Yoto, a seemingly devoted athlete who's doing squats after school, but in reality he's using this as an excuse to spy on the girls' swimming club. His view is soon ruined, however, when TSUKUSHI, the captain of the track and field club, interrupts Yoto. But rather than punish him for his Discord mod behavior, TSUKUSHI announces that for next year, she wants Yoto to take over as captain of the club, due to his determination to always work out and do squats even in horrible weather, completely unaware of Yoto's real motivations. Fearing the captain's wrath if she were to learn the truth, Yoto instead chooses to lie and thank her for this great honor, rather than admit that he is simply a man of culture. On his way home from school afterwards, Yoto complains to his best friend about how he constantly has to pretend to be someone he's not, and wishes he could just be honest about his impure thoughts without being judged. His friend understands how he feels and reveals that he visited the stony cat statue at the top of the hill and wished for his impure thoughts to vanish, which surprisingly worked. That night, Yoto brings his body pillow Barbara to the stony cat statue as an offering, as he plans to wish for the ability to be honest, so he can stop lying about his true impure desires. But once he arrives there, he runs into a girl named Tsukiko, who upon seeing Barbara automatically believes that he's some weird creep and runs away. Wanting to clear the misunderstanding, Yoto chases after her while yelling to stop resisting, which only makes the situation worse. But when he finally catches up to her and pins her down, Tsukiko panics and tells him that she's as flat as a board, but that maybe she'll develop more in 2 years, and hopes she can stay pure until then. But after some talking, the misunderstanding is cleared and Yoto apologizes, which makes Tsukiko laugh as she remarks that even his apology is creepy. Tsukiko then confesses that in her family, if they are touched by a man, he must take responsibility, but immediately says she's joking after seeing Yoto's stunned face. And as the two continue to talk, Yoto confesses that he came to the stony cat statue to wish to be more honest about his true desires, while Tsukiko confesses that she wants the opposite, as she wants to be able to better hide her emotions, because she thinks it will make her appear more mature. The two then agree to make their wishes at the same time, which causes a wave of energy to pass through them. But to their surprise, nothing seems different at all, except for the fact that one of Tsukiko's meat buns is missing, and the belt around Barbara has also disappeared, but they don't think much of it and head back home believing that their wishes failed. The next day at school, however, Yoto witnesses a boy being rejected by Azuki, a rich girl who is famous for the cruel ways in which she rejects men, and is known as the Cruel Princess. And after watching her break the heart of yet another boy, Yoto is suddenly struck by something and immediately blurts out that even though she's a cruel snob, she's still as flat as a board. Azuki is completely taken aback by this comment, and Yoto himself can't believe those words just came out of his mouth. But as Azuki attempts to put Yoto in his place, he is once again struck by something, and forcefully blurts out that although he personally loves them big, flat is also good, and congratulates her on her tiny meat buns. He then immediately tries to outrun his embarrassment, but accidentally runs into TSUKUSHI, and is once more struck by the curse, forcing him to blurt out that the captain also has amazing melons, before running away completely embarrassed. And due to these events, Yoto gains the nickname of the Impure Prince. But while he laments his new nickname after school, he's visited by a girl that he doesn't really recognize at first, prompting her to pull him down to recreate how they met. And once Yoto finally recognizes Tsukiko, she says with a monotone voice and emotionless face that this position is greatly embarrassing for her. The two then return to the stony cat statue after having realized that their wishes really did come true, as Tsukiko has lost her expressiveness, and Yoto finds himself unable to lie. But according to the legends of the cat statue, what they wished for wasn't just taken away, but was given to someone else who needed what they didn't want. And with that, the two of them decide to work together to find the people who now possess the traits they wished away, so they can convince them to return them back. The next day at school, Yoto finds himself in the school infirmary being nursed back to health by Tsukiko, after the cat statue's curse caused him to ask TSUKUSHI about how her plot got so massive, and was immediately knocked out for it. But as Yoto talks with Tsukiko, they come to realize that the belt around Azuki's neck looks awfully similar to the belt that was around Yoto's beloved Barbara, and deduce that Azuki must now possess Yoto's ability to lie. Determined to get it back from her, Yoto chases after Azuki and demands she return what was stolen from him. He then continues to push Azuki's buttons in hopes that she will wish away her ability to lie, by saying that he wants to be by her side forever. But as he goes in for what seems to be a kiss, he instead gets on all fours and says he wants to be her loyal dog from now on. And although Azuki desperately wants to refuse and reject him, the cat's curse kicks in, forcing her to lie and say that she'd love to have him as her dog. The rest of the school then cheers as the impure prince has somehow conquered the cruel princess. Meanwhile, Tsukiko watches from afar and remarks just how stupid Yoto truly is. In the following days, Yoto begins following Azuki around like a dog everywhere she goes, as he continues his plan to try and force her to wish away his ability to lie. When this proves fruitless, however, Yoto and Tsukiko decide to visit an animal-themed maid cafe together to discuss a new strategy. But when they get there, Tsukiko is disappointed to find out that this isn't actually a date, but that Yoto just wanted to see cute girls cosplaying. Surprisingly, one of these cute girls working at the cafe is none other than Azuki, which Yoto and Tsukiko stumble upon by complete coincidence, but both Azuki and Tsukiko believe that Yoto is just a creepy stalker who followed her there. And after teasing Azuki and her cute cosplay for a while, she eventually runs away embarrassed, and Yoto and Tsukiko decide that it's best to approach her after work. But when it suddenly starts to rain, the two take shelter in front of a love hotel, which fuels Yoto's impure thoughts and makes Tsukiko wonder if this makes them look like a real couple. And although this embarrasses her, she's thankful that she can't show it due to the stony cat's curse. Later that day, after the sun comes back out, the two randomly stumble upon Azuki again, who's now working on a construction site. And after stalking her for real this time, Yoto finds out that Azuki has been doing all kinds of part-time jobs, and even sleeping at school, in order to maintain the illusion that she is rich and wealthy. When Azuki then curses him out for this stalking behavior, Yoto reassures her that he wasn't stalking her, but rather just staying physically close to her without her consent. Then out of nowhere, Yoto suddenly asks Azuki out on a date, which she surprisingly agrees to by saying that it's the master's responsibility to care for her pets. When Azuki then leaves, Tsukiko reveals herself to have been eavesdropping this whole time, and demands to know why Yoto wants to date the cruel princess, but Yoto reassures her that this is all part of his plan to make Azuki give back her ability to lie. Unconvinced by his excuse, however, the jealous Tsukiko decides to spy on them during their date. On the day of the date, Yoto takes Azuki shopping for a wedding dress in a misguided attempt to show her the joys of living an honest life like a normal person. When Azuki then panics and says she's not ready for marriage nor anything that comes before it, Yoto insists that he's ready to take responsibility, resulting in his stomach being rearranged by her fist. And with Yoto's plan now as crushed as his guts, Tsukiko decides to step in, which soon leads to the two girls fighting over the impure prince. Eventually, however, the gang decides to head to an arcade to continue the date together, where Tsukiko proves her skills by effortlessly winning Azuki a stuffed turtle, and by building an audience as she jams out on the drums. But despite the girls getting along well together, Azuki gets a bit upset when Yoto brings up the topic of friends, as she claims she has no real friends, before leaving for the restroom. Shortly after, TSUKUSHI, the track and field captain and surprisingly Tsukiko's older sister, shows up and demands to know why Yoto is on a date with Tsukiko, forcing the two to immediately flee together to avoid the captain's wrath. When Azuki then returns from the restroom, she's shocked to see that she's been ditched by her so-called friends. But when they return, they find Azuki being bullied by two girls from her old school, who make fun of her for being alone at an arcade. When the girls then leave and Yoto tries to approach Azuki, she acts cold towards them, believing that they set up this date just to bully and make fun of her, and tells them to never talk to her again, as she runs away crying. The next day, Yoto heads to Azuki's apartment to try to apologize and clear up the misunderstanding, but she refuses to talk to him. Desperate to find a way to get through to her, he breaks into Azuki's room and drags her out of her apartment, while her mother just casually cheers them on and tells them to enjoy their trip. In the car, Yoto tells Azuki that she doesn't need to push everyone away and she doesn't need to pretend to be rich either, and reassures her that she's already very cute, and that by acting naturally, people will naturally start to like her. And while Yoto carries her up the hill to the stony cat statue, Azuki asks Yoto if he will fall in love with her if she starts acting as her honest self, but he bluntly replies that he doesn't like her like that, which leaves her speechless. And when they finally arrive at the stony cat statue, Yoto explains everything about how he had wished to be more honest, and how Azuki gained his ability to lie afterwards, and how he only got close to her to get it back from her. After hearing this revelation, Azuki begins to cry and curse Yoto out, as she realizes that he's just been using her this whole time. And after coming to understand his feelings, Azuki wishes on the stony cat statue, returning her ability to lie to Yoto. And with everything resolved peacefully in the end, the two promise to continue being friends. At school the next day, Tsukiko secretly comes across Azuki and Yoto talking, and overhears Azuki inviting Yoto out on a date, which he misunderstands as just a casual hangout. When Yoto then bumps into Tsukiko later after school, He thanks her for helping him regain his ability to lie. In response, Tsukiko asks him to show his gratitude by going on a date with her, which Yoto immediately agrees to. She then expresses that she'd be a better wife than Azuki because her cooking is good and her massages are top-notch, but immediately refuses Yoto's request for a massage. But while the two continue to talk, Tsukiko confesses that she believes she is the reason why her relationship with her sister TSUKUSHI is so awful, and goes on to explain how after her parents passed away, she leaned heavily on her sister for support and would often cry, and to avoid being a burden, Tsukiko attempted to hide her emotions. The following day, Yoto visits the track and field club to hear TSUKUSHI's side of the story, but is immediately threatened for taking her younger sister out on a date. Thanks to his newly regained lying ability, however, Yoto fabricates a story about how he actually has an identical twin brother who is to blame for everything, which the captain surprisingly believes without question. But while they're on the topic of siblings, Yoto attempts to question TSUKUSHI about her relationship with her sister, and learns that TSUKUSHI was actually the one who made the stony cat statue as a way of apologizing to Tsukiko when they were younger. The next day, Yoto and Tsukiko finally go on a date together where Tsukiko makes use of Yoto's cosplay expertise to help her choose a cute costume for an event she's partaking in. But as is tradition in anime, Yoto accidentally stumbles upon her while she's changing. Surprisingly, however, Tsukiko easily forgives him for this, as she already knew that the impure prince could not be trusted. After seeing Tsukiko off at the end of the date, Yoto is immediately caught by TSUKUSHI, who refuses to let Yoto's twin brother date her little sister. But as the two start to argue, TSUKUSHI reveals that she wants to cut ties with Tsukiko because she gets too emotional in tough situations, and does not believe that Tsukiko's recent lack of expression has anything to do with the stony cat statue. As such, the captain decides to destroy the stony cat statue once and for all, and knocks out Yoto's twin when he tries to intervene. When he regains consciousness shortly after, Tsukiko expresses her concerns that if she were to get her expressions back due to her sister destroying the cat statue, that there would be nothing connecting her to Yoto, and that he would eventually stop spending time with her. Earnestly wanting to help Tsukiko, Yoto meets with TSUKUSHI after school at the stony cat statue, where he wishes for the stony cat to take away his urge to run away in exchange for his underwear, determined to stand his ground. He then proudly announces that he loves Tsukiko as his little sister and loves her more than TSUKUSHI ever could, which leads to her beating him up, but thankfully Yoto has no underwear left to soil. But when Tsukiko reveals herself to end their fighting, TSUKUSHI confesses that she does love Tsukiko, but actually in a romantic way, and that she wants to cut ties with her sister so that they can get married in Massachusetts, a dream which is quickly shot down by Tsukiko. TSUKUSHI then calls out to the stony cat statue, who returns the meat bun containing Tsukiko's expressions, but Tsukiko decides to give it to TSUKUSHI instead so she can smile like she used to when they were younger. Sometime later during summer vacation, as the stony cat's powers have apparently disappeared and everything has been back to normal for a while now, Yoto is confused to find that Tsukiko is rather cold towards him lately, but is even more shocked when he discovers that his house has suddenly disappeared. Meanwhile, Azuki is on vacation with the girls who used to bully her after Yoto reached out to them to set it up so they could make amends. But while Yoto enlists Tsukiko's help in determining the whereabouts of his house, Azuki becomes frustrated as she believed that Yoto would be coming on the trip too. But while investigating the disappearance of his house, Yoto and Tsukiko don't make a lot of progress. And when it suddenly starts to rain, Tsukiko decides to invite Yoto over to her house to stay the night, a proposition which the impure prince is eager to accept. And after taking a bath at Tsukiko's house while thinking of impure thoughts, Yoto accidentally runs into the girls on his way out of the bath, with TSUKUSHI being completely flustered by this sight, while Tsukiko simply tries to satisfy her curiosity. As punishment, TSUKUSHI wraps Yoto in a futon, but in reality he seems to actually enjoy being sat on by his dami mommy until she hits him with a real punishment. But later that night, while TSUKUSHI is sound asleep on top of Yoto, he tries to wiggle his way out of the futon, only to be caught by a still sleeping TSUKUSHI, who mumbles about her fears of Tsukiko leaving her. Once freed, Yoto decides to take a stroll around the girl's house when he mysteriously stumbles upon their storage room, where he finds many of his belongings that were in his house before it vanished, and even finds a large stony cat statue. When Tsukiko later finds Yoto asleep in their storage room, he explains that the storage room seems to have everything that used to be in his house and believes that the cat statue has something to do with it. To verify their suspicions, Yoto asks the captain about the cat statue during their training session the next day and learns that it is a god which her family worships. Later that night, while he's in the storage room, Azuki calls Yoto and asks him why he never called her during her trip, and complains that even a dumb impure prince like him doesn't want to see her in her swimsuit. In response, Yoto says that of course he wishes to see Azuki in her swimsuit, and she suddenly falls right on top of him, as if a gift sent straight from heaven. And after a lot of panic and confusion, the two realize that the giant cat statue has the power to grant wishes. But when Azuki jokingly wishes for Yoto to tickle her belly, she quickly realizes that this cat statue grants wishes in unpredictable ways, and undoes her wish before Yoto crosses a line that can't be uncrossed. Later that evening, after having dinner with the girls, Yoto explains to Tsukiko what happened and tells her that the cat god must have been the cause of his house disappearing. Upon hearing this, Tsukiko immediately feels guilty and apologizes, and says that she only wished to be together with Yoto. But later that night, while Yoto is thinking of what Tsukiko said, TSUKUSHI barges in and tries to seduce him in an attempt to keep him away from Tsukiko, as she's afraid that Yoto's twin will take Tsukiko away and leave her all alone. In the heat of the conversation, TSUKUSHI wishes that the whole world would just collapse, and in an instant, the cat god grants her wish and the entire building comes crashing down, leaving a scene of devastation, and leaving Yoto on top of a flustered TSUKUSHI, who begs him to be gentle. The captain then undoes her wish and the storage room returns to normal, but as the storm grows stronger by the minute, the gang starts moving important objects to the upper level of the house to keep them dry, and stumble upon the room where TSUKUSHI creepily keeps her sister's photos. Tsukiko was completely unaware of this room's existence, and responds to this revelation by ripping apart the photos. Realizing that the storm is still growing stronger despite TSUKUSHI canceling her wish, Yoto deduces that someone else's wish must be the cause of the storm. Yoto then confronts Tsukiko when they finally have some alone time together, and is surprised when Tsukiko asks him to be her real brother so they can spend more time together. But despite the sincerity of this request, Yoto declines, causing the storm to grow even worse. Tsukiko believes that if they are not bonded by family, that Yoto will eventually leave her, but when Yoto insists that they'll be together forever even if they're not family, Tsukiko eventually agrees to return to the way things were before, and the storm immediately subsides. Sometime later, as they discuss their plans for their school festival, Yoto and Tsukiko stumble on a pink-haired girl named Emi, who is extremely clingy with Yoto, much to Tsukiko's annoyance. And while talking to her, they learn that Emi is actually the younger sister of PONTA, Yoto's best friend. PONTA then asks Yoto to take Emi on a tour of their school, which he agrees to without much objection. But while walking through school, Emi discovers that Yoto is nicknamed the Impure Prince at school, and suddenly wishes upon her miniature cat statue to turn Yoto popular, and to turn their school into something more enjoyable. As a result of her wish, Emi turns their school's architecture into ancient Rome, and the girls wear swimsuits as school uniforms, while addressing Yoto as Prince. But while everyone else treats this new reality as normal, Tsukiko blames Yoto's impure thoughts as the reasons for the wish, and prompts him to cancel it immediately, but Yoto insists that he didn't wish for this. Later that day, TSUKUSHI surprisingly sides with Yoto, and decides to help him prove his innocence in order for her to show off her good side to Yoto's twin brother. Afterwards, the two head to Yoto's house, but as TSUKUSHI finds pictures of Yoto's twin, Yoto suddenly remembers that PONTA never had a little sister, and that PONTA's pet rabbit was actually the one named Emi. But on his way to school the next day, Yoto runs into PONTA, who informs him that his rabbit has gone missing. Once at school, Yoto asks Azuki for help in finding PONTA's lost rabbit, since Tsukiko has been acting cold towards him lately. And although she wasn't his first choice, Azuki is still eager to spend some alone time with her beloved impure prince. Later that night, however, PONTA calls Yoto to let him know that he was able to find his lost rabbit thanks to Azuki's efforts, and reminisces about how Emi and Yoto always had a really close relationship, which Yoto does not remember at all. The following morning, after confronting Emi about her inconsiderate use of wishes, Emi badmouths Yoto in response, before canceling all her wishes, and throwing a rock in his face as she leaves. Later that day, however, Yoto realizes that not all of Emi's wishes were lifted, as parts of the school still look Italian. When Emi is seen about to jump from the top of the school's tower, Azuki then tells Yoto how to get to the top of the tower so he can save her, and smiles as she watches him leave. Once he reaches Emi and talks with her, Yoto realizes that Emi is angry at him for having forgotten her, as she wonders if he's the only one he's forgotten. But when Emi recounts their first encounter, Yoto suddenly vaguely remembers when he first met Emi. Their conversation is soon interrupted by Azuki. But as Yoto realizes that the speaker doesn't sound like her at all, he discovers that the cat god has possessed Azuki. The cat god then explains that from that start, it was actually all Yoto's wish to turn their school into Italy, and that he unconsciously created Emi as a minor tool to fulfill his desires. In response, Emi wishes for the cat god to go to hell, which the god informs them would take Azuki's body along with it. But he tells Yoto that he can spare Azuki by canceling his wishes, which would mean saying goodbye to Emi forever, but saving Azuki in exchange. Refusing to lose either of them, the impure prince decides to forcibly kiss the cruel princess in a desperate attempt to help her regain control of her body, which surprisingly works, removing her from the cat god's control, while canceling Yoto's wish and sparing Emi in the end. And although things seem to have returned to normal now, the next day at school, Azuki is revealed to have become madly in love with Yoto. And to make matters worse, after school Yoto finds Tsukiko lamenting in his room, as she stabs Barbara repeatedly, before hiding inside his body pillow. But she's soon found by Yoto as he teases her, and she kicks him in the face. But before leaving, Tsukiko expresses her jealousy at Yoto being close with so many girls, and wishes she could be the only one. After some time, however, Yoto has a chance to think and come to terms with his feelings, and decides to be open and honest with Tsukiko by telling her that he hopes to be by her side forever. Satisfied with this apology, Tsukiko gives him permission to come sit closer to her. But when Yoto reaffirms his desire to be with her, the two finally manage to get their feelings across to one another. Days later, the gang decides to go on a group date to the amusement park, with Yoto and all his waifus, and they spend the whole day having fun in various rides. And despite Tsukiko still being jealous of having to share Yoto with the other girls, by the end of the day it becomes clear that she's his number one. Thanks so much for watching this anime recap, and remember to be careful with what you wish for.